Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Quill, and I'm from Macmillan Publishers. And today I am so thrilled to introduce you to our next incredible speaker, Jonathan Mooney. Jonathan Mooney is a writer, activist, and speaker whose work has been featured in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, USA Today, New York Magazine, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, HBO, NPR, and ABC News. Jonathan continues to speak across the nation about neurological and physical diversity, inspiring those who live with differences and advocating for change. His books include The Short Bus, Learning Outside the Lines, and most recently, Normal Sucks: How to Live, Learn, and Thrive Outside the Lines. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Mooney.
Well, hey, everybody. My name is Jonathan, and I am just so honored to be a part of this amazing group of writers and activists and thinkers. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share with you today the themes and personal stories from my new and subtly titled new book, Normal Sucks. A philosopher I admire named Michel Foucault wrote that the judges of normality are ever present everywhere. And I think that's a deeply true statement. We all are surrounded by institutions, systems, and cultural processes that demand and enforce normalcy. And for too many of us, those demands to be normal, those judges of normality, wound us deeply. I know that personally. I'm the kid who was the proverbial square peg that did not fit the round hole of American education. I was the kid who had such a hard time sitting still that I spent most of the day chilling out with the janitor in the hallway. I was the kid who grew up on a first name basis with Shirley, the receptionist in the principal's office. And I was the kid that spent a lot of the day hiding in the bathroom to escape reading out loud with tears streaming down my face. I was diagnosed in third grade with a continuum of language-based learning differences, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and others. I was diagnosed in fourth grade with a whole bunch of executive functioning and attentional disorders, ADHD, and others. And I did not learn to read until I was 12. I dropped out of school for about a year in sixth grade. And that year, when I left school, I struggled with a number of mental health challenges. I struggled with anxiety, I struggled with depression, and I had a plan for suicide. So y'all can imagine, by the time I got into adolescence and beyond, there were all sorts of low expectations that surrounded me. Low expectations that too often surround folks who don't fit our narrow definition of what constitutes normal. I heard it all. I was told I'd be a high school dropout. I was told I'd be unemployed. I was told at one point that I would be incarcerated. But you know what? I beat those odds and I transcended those low expectations. Opposed to being a high school dropout, I became a college graduate. I graduated from Brown University with an honors degree in, of all things, English literature, right? Opposed to being unemployed, I ended up writing books. First book I wrote as an undergraduate at Brown. And most importantly, opposed to being an inmate, I became an advocate, somebody who has dedicated his life to making the world a better place for folks who live and learn outside the lines. So I want to talk with you today about what I know, what I believe, what I fight for to build a more inclusive world for folks with atypical brains and bodies. I want to share with you a path towards thriving for folks who learn and live differently. That path towards thriving starts when we empower folks like me to extricate themselves from the negative messages that they've been given about who they are and help them rebuild a more positive sense of self. If you were to ask me when I was 18 years old, my freshman year in college, to describe myself to you, I would have said I'm the stupid, crazy, lazy kid. You know, too many folks who deviate from the middle of the bell curve get the message that their differences make them deficient. As Ian Hacking said, we confuse normal as something that is and also as something that should be. Normal is good and right, and different is deficient. And subsequently, folks with atypical brains and bodies get the message, not that they're different, but that they are abnormal and in some ways less than as human beings. You know, I know that in my own life. I remember when I was first diagnosed, right? And my mom and I were called into the school psychologist's office to get the test results back. And the moment me and my mom walked into that office, it was obvious that everybody in that room thought we were getting terrible, tragic news. You know, the lights were down low. There was jazz music playing in the background. There was a box of tissues on the table. You know, all the mirrors were covered because we were there to sit Shiva for the death of my normality, right? It was clear that everyone in that room thought something was wrong with me. But the reality is, those judges of normality were wrong about me, and they're wrong about folks with atypical brains and bodies. The problem isn't in the person. The problem isn't the difference. The problem is the way the difference is treated in environments and systems designed around the myth that we should all be the same. You know, my problem wasn't dyslexia. My problem was being made to feel stupid because I learned differently. My problem wasn't ADD, but being made to feel bad and morally defective because I couldn't sit still. The problem isn't autism, but the bullying. The problem isn't developmental disabilities, but the short bus and special education practices. The problem isn't the difference, but the way the difference is treated in environments designed around institutionalized ableism that privileges some brains and bodies over others. That's the problem. And I can tell you, reframing that problem is a revelation in somebody's sense of self if they've been called deficient. It is a rebuilding and a reclaiming of who you are, and that matters. Perhaps more importantly, when we reframe that problem and we see the problem not in the person, but the way the person's treated, not only can we think differently about people who live and learn differently, we can then act differently towards them. And you know, in my life, that acting different was all about my mom. You know, hey, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mom. So let me give you a quick mental image of her, right? You know, my mom is quite a character, you know. She's not a tall woman. On a good day, in high heels, on her tippy toes, my mom is 4'11", right? Little Irish bulldog, you know? And a lot of folks underestimated my mom because my mom struggled in school herself. My mom had my brothers and two sisters all before she was 20 years old and found herself on public assistance. So people looked down on her. And they also underestimated my mom because she had this very funny voice. You know, my mom has a high-pitched, squeaky voice. She totally sounds like Minnie Mouse, you know? So people dismissed her. She wasn't tall, she wasn't wealthy, and she sounded like Minnie Mouse. But folks dismissed my mom at their own peril. Because if you were a teacher doing wrong by her son, you did not want cursing Minnie Mouse in your face, right? But that's where my mom was every single day when things were going wrong for me. How did we know she was in that office? Well, we knew she was in that office because every dog in the neighborhood was running away, right? Only bats could hear her high-pitched obscenities. Glass was shattering. You know, my mom understood something that we all should understand. I didn't need somebody in my life to fix me. What I needed was somebody in my life to fight for and with me. You know, there's a long and nefarious history of putting the problem in the person with difference and subsequently trying to fix that person, remediate that person, and in some ways eliminate the difference. We make the square peg fit the round hole. But my mom rejected that. My mom would say to anyone who would listen, she would say, if my son doesn't learn the way he's taught, well, guess what? Teach the way he learns. Now, I'll admit that's a little bit of a paraphrase, because when my mom said it, there were a whole bunch of F-bombs in there that I left out, right? But nonetheless, my mom fought for the environment to change around me. And that's the path forward for individuals learning to be advocates for themselves, for their rights, for access to employment, to education, to community, for accommodations in higher education. But it's ultimately our work together to be advocates to reframe our experience of disability out of a pathology model that sees disability as defect to a diversity model, to see different brains and bodies as a continuum of diversity that is valuable to the world. And ultimately, our work together is to fight against that institutionalized ableism and the way that we have designed systems around the myth of normal, and reject that and build systems around the reality of human difference. Universally designed education, places of work that don't just work for some humans, but ultimately work for all humans. But ultimately, a path to thriving and healing isn't just about reframing the problem. It's not just about resisting the urge to fix people. It's ultimately about rejecting normality as a prerequisite to personhood. When I walked out of that school psychologist's office, and when I heard all about my deficits and problems and was demoralized as a young kid, I turned to my mom and I said, "Hey, Mom, am I normal?" And my mom looked right at me and she said, "Jonathan, normal sucks." And you know what? She's right. The word normal did not enter the English language until the 1860s. Normal hasn't always been normal, but nonetheless, it's been put to nefarious usages. The idea of a normal human being and subsequently abnormal human being has been used to biologically disqualify whole swaths of human beings, Black and brown folks, LGBTQ plus folks, Latinx folks, and everybody in between. Its time is up. It's got to go. Because the truth is, the only normal people are people you don't know very well. Because the moment you get to know another human being, the moment you see them for who they are, not who you think they should be, it is their eccentricities, it's their fallibility, it's their ability, their disability, it is their difference that constitutes their humanity. And we need together, more than ever, to fight for a world where every single human being has a right to be different. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, to share with you my journey, my book, and more importantly, what I have fought for 20 years to build a more inclusive world for people with different brains and bodies.